Welcome to Conversations at the Crossroads, the podcast where spirituality meets the beautifully messy experience of being human. I'm Jenny, a tarot reader, a Reiki practitioner, witch, mentor, hairstylist, and the voice behind Conversations at the Crossroads. Each week, we gather here at the Crossroads to explore spirituality, personal growth, and tools that help us navigate an ever-evolving human journey. Some conversations will dive into the mystical, others into the practical, and sometimes we'll just sit together through the hard stuff. Along the way, we may explore ideas that challenge us, stories that shift our perspective, or practices that help us walk our paths with a little more intention. So wherever you're listening from, take a breath, settle in, and join me on the crossroads. Okay. So, have you ever met someone for the first time and your whole nervous system went, oh, it's you again? Or had a pattern show up in your life for the fourth, fifth, sixth time and thought, I know this isn't new. I know that I've done this dance before. That feeling has a name. Some traditions call it karma, some call it a soul memory. And there's a whole framework going back over 100 years now for the idea that literally everything, every thought, every choice, every version of you that's ever existed is being recorded somewhere. Today, we're taking our time with the Akashic Records, where the idea actually came from, the very human people who shaped it, the man who brought it into everyday spiritual language just a few miles from where I'm sitting right now, what the records actually are versus what the internet has kind of turned them into, and how you can start your own relationship with your own book of life. Your soul has receipts, so let's read them. So, starting out, what is Akasha? Let's start with the word itself. Akasha is a Sanskrit word. It means ether or space, the fifth element in the classical Indian philosophy alongside earth, water, air, fire. In that tradition, Akasha isn't just empty space the way we might picture a vacuum. It's more like the substance that everything else moves through, the medium that sound and thought and vibration travel across. It's an old concept, thousands of years old, and it belongs to a real tradition, Hindu and Vedic philosophy, long before it ever got picked up by Western mystics in the 19th century. That borrowing matters. When we talk about the Akashic Records today, we're talking about the Western esoteric idea wearing an Eastern word. Worth knowing up front so we can hold this tradition with some honesty and about where it actually comes from. So, how did a Sanskrit word for ether become a cosmic filing system for your soul? That's where theosophy comes in. A quick definition, since I'll be saying this word a few times. I hope I pronounce it right all the way through. But theosophy comes from the Greek word meaning divine wisdom. It's a body of esoteric, philosophical, and religious belief founded in an organized movement in New York City by a small group that included a Russian-born mystic named Helena Blavatsky. A theosophist is simply someone who belonged to it. At its core, the theosophy movement holds that all world religions share a single, universal, and ancient truth underneath their different names and rituals, and that you can access direct spiritual knowledge of the divine yourself, not secondhand through a priest or a text, but through mystical insight, through intuition and meditation. Theosophy borrowed heavily and not always carefully from Hindu and Buddhist philosophy and mixed it with Western occultism and built something new out of that combination. That's the lens the whole concept got filtered through. And that's why the language around the Akashic Records has that blended East meets West feel to it. Blavatsky herself was a wildly controversial figure, even in her own time. She claimed to be in contact with hidden spiritual masters who fed her secret teachings. In her major work, a massive book called The Secret Doctrine, she wrote about something she called the astral light, a kind of subtle substance that records every event, every thought, every act permanently, like a cosmic photograph that never fades. She called these recordings indestructible tablets of astral light. A few years later, a fellow theosophist named Alfred Percy Sinnett took that idea and gave it a name we actually use today. He's the one who really coined the phrase Akashic Records. Then a man named Rudolf Steiner picked up that thread. Steiner started out as a theosophist himself and then broke away in the early 1900s to found his own movement, anthroposophy. He claimed he could access the records directly and use that access to write about lost civilizations like Atlantis and Lemuria, and even claimed to reveal details about Jesus' life he said weren't recorded by any of the four Gospels. He called what he was doing reading the Akashic Chronicle. So, by the early 20th century, this idea had become fully formed in Western occult circles. Somewhere in some non-physical dimension, everything that has ever happened is being recorded, and certain gifted people can learn to read it. And then it landed on a Kentucky farm boy with a grade school education. That's Edgar Cayce. He's commonly known as the Sleeping Prophet. He gave over 14,000 documented readings over 4 decades while in a self-induced trance. And it was in a 1923 reading that first brought reincarnation and the Akashic Records into his work. He's the reason most of us in the English-speaking world even know this phrase at all. And he's the one who really carried it out of niche occult circles and into everyday spiritual language, describing the records as, quote, the universal memory of nature, end quote, or the book of life. Here's a fun one for you. Cayce eventually settled in Virginia Beach, the same area I live in. I live in Hampton Roads, Virginia. And he founded the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the ARE, which is still standing and thriving and open to the public today, just a few miles from where my business sits. His full story and his life is genuinely wild enough to deserve its own episode, so consider this a little preview, because we'll come back and do a deep dive on Cayce and the ARE another time. But for today, just know his name and know that this history is closer to home than you might think. So, what are the records? What are they not also? I want to clear up some things now that we have the real history under us, because the internet does as the internet does and has made kind of a confusing mess out of it. The Akashic Records are not a fortune-telling machine. They're not going to hand you a fixed script of your future like it's already written in stone. Most practitioners, going back to Cayce himself, describe the records as showing patterns and potentials, not a full locked-in fate. Think of it less like a prophecy and more like, here is the pattern that you keep running. Here's what happens if you keep running it. And here's what's possible if you don't. They're also not just a past life encyclopedia. Even though past life work is a huge part of what people go in looking for, the records hold thoughts, feelings, intentions, choices this life and others. It's less of who was I in the 1500s in France and more like, why do I keep abandoning myself the moment things get good? And they're not a diagnosis or replacement for actual medical or mental health care. If you've listened to or watched any of my other episodes, you'll know I say this often. Spiritual tools are a companion to your healing, not a substitute for it. Just to keep that clear. So, how do people access the records? Well, there's no one official way in, and honestly, it's been true since Casey's own time. Different teachers, different methods, the same underlying idea. You're attuning yourself to receive information that isn't coming from your everyday thinking mind. So there's a few ways that people do this. One, like Edgar Casey, was using trance and deep meditation. This was Casey's method. It was a deep, self-induced, altered state where he could tap into both his own subconscious and that universal record beyond it. There's also a process called the pathway prayer process. This was developed by a contemporary teacher, Linda Howe. This is probably one of the most widely used structured methods today. It's essentially a formal prayer or invocation that opens the records for a specific person, spoken with clear intention and permission. There's also guided meditation, which is the way that I have experienced thus far the Akashic Records. This is one of the most accessible entry points for beginners, which I am definitely still a beginner. And it's exactly what our companion meditation walks you through today. You don't need a trance state or years of training to start building a relationship with your own records. There's also pendulum work or dowsing, like using dowsing rods, as yes or no tools. Some practitioners use these tools that they've already calibrated for yes and no answers to get simple confirmations from the records. Across basically every method, three things show up again and again: setting an intention, permission, and protection. You're not breaking into a locked room. You're asking to be let in, specifically to your own book, and you're grounding and protecting yourself before and after the same way you would before any deep spiritual work. So how do we use the records for our actual growth? And this is the really important part. Because, it can be easy to learn the history and about the methods and still walk away thinking, cool, but what do I actually do with this? So I want to talk about how the records function as a real personal growth tool, not just a party trick or a piece of interesting trivia. You want to start with the right kind of question. This is the single biggest thing that determines whether a session or a meditation feels useful or feel like nothing's happened. A lot of times I feel like vague questions get vague answers. Will I be successful? Doesn't really give the records much to work with. Something like, what is the root of my fear around being seen? Or what pattern keeps showing up in my romantic relationships and where did it start? Gives you something you can actually work with afterwards. A few categories that tend to open things up well can be relationship patterns, like the people you keep attracting, or the dynamics that repeat. You can go with career and purpose, especially if you're feeling stuck or like you're supposed to be doing something else. Or if you feel like you want to do something else, but you want to feel more connected to what that something else is. You can go down the route of reoccurring emotional patterns, like the reaction that you have every single time in a specific event, or the fear that you might have that never fully goes away. Even if you look at like phobias or why is this a fear that I'm constantly wrecking my brain about? You can go in and ask about your body, like chronic tension or illness that doesn't have like an obvious cause. Or you can go in and look at gifts or callings you've felt pulled towards, but never let yourself fully claim. You want to expect information, not instructions. The records tend to hand you a picture, a feeling, an image, a word, rather than like a bullet pointed action plan. It's not like reading a literal book. Your job afterwards is to sit with what came through and translate it in your own language. That's just the process of it. If you don't have something specific and concrete, it's not a failing, it's just a beginning. If you literally got nothing, that's also information. Sometimes it means the question wasn't specific enough yet. Sometimes it means today isn't the day. Sometimes it means that maybe that information is yet to be written. I would suggest treating it like a relationship and not a vending machine. One visit to your records isn't going to hand you your whole life story. The people who get the most out of this work go back over and over. I have a friend who every single time there is a guided meditation at the place that I spend a lot of time at, the Holistic Treehouse, they have monthly a guided Akashic Records meditation. And I know people who religiously go every month because they're doing this work consistently. And people ask the questions and they sit with the answer for a few weeks and they notice what shows up in real life, and then they come back with the next layer of the question, and it builds over time, the same way therapy would, or a regular tarot practice. You also want to integrate the information or the ideas or downloads or things that come to you within these practices. You want to integrate them, not just collect it. Whatever comes through, write it down immediately before you second guess it. Then actually look for it in your life over the following days and weeks. Did that fear of being seen show up when you almost didn't post something, or didn't speak up in a meeting or an important conversation with a loved one? That's the records doing their job quietly in the background. It's not just in the meditation itself. This is where real growth happens, in the noticing, not just the receiving. And I would say it works best when you pair it with the rest of your toolkit. This works best alongside everything else you're doing already. Therapy, shadow work, journaling, tarot, conversations with the people involved. The records are excellent at showing you the shape of a pattern. They're not a substitute for doing the work of changing that pattern. So why does it matter right now? Something I just keep thinking of is so much of the healing work that we do, shadow work, therapy, tarot, all of that, can often be the same question asked 100 different ways. Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep experiencing this, XYZ? Or why does XYZ keep happening around me? The Akashic Records give that question a container, not like an escape hatch, and not a way to like blame a past life for a text you never sent back, but a place to look at the pattern with some distance and some compassion and enough information to actually choose something different this time. You don't have to be a psychic or have any sort of gift for this. You don't need 40 years of trance readings like Casey had. You don't even need to live near Virginia Beach. You just need intention and a little quiet and permission to believe that your soul has been keeping notes the whole time and it wants you to read them. If there's one thing you carry out of this episode, it's this. You're not starting from zero. You've never really started from zero. Every version of you that has ever existed left something behind for you to find, and it's still there, waiting, patient, and in your own book of life. After this episode, I'm going to upload a companion meditation for you. I'm going to call it The Threshold Within, to actually go and open the book yourself. So when you finish this episode and you have a chance to go find somewhere quiet and grab the question that comes up for you, I'll meet you there. But before I go and do that, here are, as per usual, your weekly reflection points or journal prompts, however you'd like to use them. Just that I want you to sit with around this subject. What do you already believe about whether your past is recorded somewhere, and where did that belief come from? Is there a pattern in your life right now that feels older than this version of you? Name that without judgment. If you could ask your Akashic Records one question today, no editing, and no, is this a dumb question? What would it be? Try to make it specific, not will I be happy, but something with a real edge to it, and write that down. You'll want that for the meditation. Finish this sentence. I give myself permission to... Give yourself permission for something and keep it somewhere you'll see before you press play on the meditation. What are you a little afraid that the records might confirm? And what would it mean if it turned out to be true? All right. I look forward to seeing you in the meditation, I hope. If you'd like to find more of me, you can also find me at Hex and Hair on all social media, or www.hexandhair.com. And through the rest of this week, with or without meditation, be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself, and I can't wait to see you again on the crossroads. Bye!